The question echoes like a whisper that crosses centuries. What are the four horsemen really? Not what you've heard, not what movies have distorted, but the raw, enigmatic and terrifying secret hidden in the most feared pages of Revelation. Before any interpretation, before fear, before theories, there is a silence. A silence that John heard on Patmos when the sky opened like a luminous wound and the seals began to break. And it is within this silence that the mystery is born. Because nobody talks about it honestly. Nobody confronts the weight of this vision head-on. The four horsemen are not just symbolic figures, they are living, pulsating warnings, a cosmic reminder that there is a greater force watching over human chaos, a prophecy that doesn't age, that doesn't lose relevance, that doesn't cease to cut deep into the heart of anyone who dares to look at it without averting their face. And perhaps that's why so many people avoid this subject, because it touches directly on the pains we try to hide and the desires we never admit to having, the fear of the future, the anguish of destruction, the desire to understand destiny, to know if there is any control, any order, any justice amidst the collapse of the world. Have you ever felt that? That silent unease when you realize something is wrong, that the world is accelerating toward a point of no return. It is precisely there that the secret of the four horsemen begins to make sense. They don't appear to frighten. They don't emerge to create panic. They emerge to reveal what no one wants to see, that every sign, every war, every crisis, every dark silence that hangs over humanity carries echoes of an ancient prophecy. And John, exiled alone, surrounded only by the still sea like a mirror, saw all this before anyone else. He saw the most feared chapter of Revelation unfold before his eyes, not as a distant metaphor, but as a reality so vivid it burned. He saw the first seal open and the white horseman emerge shrouded in mystery. He saw the second break and the red sword split the earth. He saw famine weigh like lead in the third. He saw death ride with authority in the fourth. These were not legends. These were not tales. These were forces. These were truths. These were warnings. And here's the point that almost no one dares to admit. Even today, thousands of years later, we still feel their footsteps. We still perceive their shadows traversing the ages. Because prophecy isn't just about the future. It's about now. It's about what we're living through. It's about the growing fear, the rising chaos, the unease that tries to warn us that the world is changing and we don't know where it's going. But before we delve into the meaning of each horseman, before we unravel the enigma behind the Bible's most terrifying warning, you need to make a choice. Face this revelation with an open mind, because this video wasn't made to entertain, it was made to confront, to provoke. To call you to see what has always been hidden and what you may have already felt without understanding. So take a deep breath. Let the silence of the sky draw near. The secret of the four horsemen is about to unfold before you, and what begins now is not just an explanation, it is an awakening. Imagine returning to the exact point where we left off, but now diving even deeper, as if we were crossing together through the same veil that opened before John. Because the vision's setting is not merely a backdrop, it's the gateway to the mystery, the environment where the impossible becomes real and the spiritual invades the physical world without asking permission. And if you truly want to understand the secret of the four horsemen, you need to walk with me into this setting, step by step, feeling the weight of the silence, the tension of the sky, the charged atmosphere where everything happens. Imagine John on Patmos, not as a distant, untouchable figure, but as a man of flesh and blood, exiled, weary, rejected by the world. The barren island, the wind cutting his skin, the sound of waves crashing against the rocks like insistent hammers. There was nothing there that could have prepared him for what was about to happen. And perhaps that is precisely what makes it all so powerful. God chose silence to reveal the loudest cry in history. He chose solitude to show the most overwhelming spectacle of the apocalypse. He chose exile to open the door to heaven. Because when the sky opens, it's not an ordinary opening. It's not a poetic metaphor. It's a rupture, a tear, a rip in reality. João didn't hear words at first. He felt the silence, a silence so absolute it seemed alive, as if creation itself had held its breath. The sea, which minutes before had moved restlessly, became still, smooth as glass. The wind stopped mid-movement. Even the island itself seemed to bow, as if recognizing that something divine was about to pass by. And then John saw the door. Not a wooden or metal door, but a luminous opening that rose into the sky as if made of time itself. A door that didn't pulse with ordinary light, but with conscious light, light that carried purpose, light that called. And everything within John knew that crossing that door meant never seeing the world the same way again. There was no turning back for those who see what lies beyond the veil. Upon entering, John did not find an empty space. He found the throne. A throne enveloped in light and lightning, so intense that it seemed each ray carried a message, each flash held a meaning, each burst of brilliance revealed fragments of glory. It was not a static vision. It was alive, it moved, it breathed. And around the throne, flashes, voices, thunder, but all of this trapped within that atmosphere of reverence and awe, as if even the celestial forces recognized the gravity of that moment. And at the center of it all, something even more mysterious. The sealed book. Not an ordinary book, but the book that defined destinies, continents, eras, kingdoms, souls. A book closed by 7 seals, each sealed with divine authority, each representing something that not even angels dared to touch. And John knew that this book was not merely a record, it was a decree, a revelation awaiting the precise moment to be released. When he looked at that book, he didn't just see symbols, he saw weight, spiritual weight, prophetic weight. The weight of a truth so profound that it topples structures, shatters illusions, exposes the human essence. And it is there, before the throne enveloped in light and lightning, with the sealed book shining as if it had a life of its own, that the entire sequence of the 4 horsemen begins. It is there that the prophecy takes on body, form, voice, movement. It is there that John goes from exile to witness of the supernatural. Can you feel the atmosphere? Can you perceive how everything in the sky was prepared? How no detail was left out? How everything converged on that moment? Because before the horsemen appeared, before the seals were opened, before any judgment took shape, God showed the scene. He showed where the truth is revealed. He showed where history ends and begins again. He showed the center of the spiritual universe, the throne. And that matters. It matters a lot. Because the apocalypse doesn't begin with destruction. It begins with sovereignty. It begins with order. It begins with God in absolute control, while the world outside thinks it's crumbling on its own. And here's something many people ignore. John didn't have a chaotic vision. He had an organized vision, orchestrated every element, the silence, the door, the throne, the lightning, the sealed book, all serves to show that nothing happens by chance. That the end times are not chaos but fulfillment, that the 4 horsemen are not rebels galloping aimlessly, but executors of a decree that springs from the throne itself. That's why you need to feel this scenario before we move forward. You need to see John there, vulnerable, small in the face of greatness. Because the clearer this image is, the greater the impact will be when the first seal is broken. And we're almost there. Just imagine the tension, the expectation, the suspense, the unspoken question. Who is worthy to open the book? If you're feeling this atmosphere, if you can see this open door in the sky, comment below, I see the door. I want to know who is truly sharing this vision with me. And if something about this scene struck you, describe it in the comments. Your perception could open the eyes of many people who will watch it later. When John raises his eyes to that sealed book, the entire atmosphere seems to hold its breath. It's as if heaven itself wants to witness the moment when reality will be divided into before and after. And then, when the first seal finally breaks, it's not just a sound, it's a spiritual tremor, as if every fiber of creation reacts to the touch of that divine decree being released. And before this breaking, the first of them appears, the White Knight. He doesn't appear with violence. He doesn't appear with blood. He appears with brilliance. He appears with charm. He appears with an almost divine, almost seductive, almost too perfect appearance to be ignored. And that's precisely where the danger lies. The horse is white, imposing, majestic, so luminous it seems to carry purity. The rider, firm, almost heroic, advances with the posture of a victor. He carries a bow, but without arrows. This detail, which many ignore, is precisely the puzzle that separates those who understand the prophecy from those who only repeat what they have heard. Because, however strange it may seem, the power of this rider lies not in attacking, but in convincing. Not in wounding, but in dominating. Not in visible impact, but in psychological, emotional, and spiritual impact. He conquers not by force, but by promise. Not by war, but by peace. A peace that does not spring from God, it springs from deception. And this is where the enigma begins. Those who look too quickly think it's Christ. After all, white, victorious, crowned on a shining horse. But prophecy is not read in haste. The details reveal the opposite. The crown, in this case, is not the crown of eternity. It is the crown of temporal permission. The bow without arrows, far from being a symbol of true peace, is the symbol of manipulation, of silent conquest, of psychological dominance, of false diplomacy, of a promise that sounds divine but is born from chaos. This horseman inaugurates the cycle of seals with what the world most fears and at the same time most desires, a peace that seems like a solution but prepares destruction. Think about it. How many times in history has a seemingly just, wise, enlightened voice emerged promising unity, progress, justice, only to deliver tyranny, manipulation, and collapse? How many times have leaders, ideologies, movements, systems risen on the white horse of hope, only to reveal too late the poison hidden beneath the promise? This is exactly the pattern that the first horseman represents. He doesn't attack. He conquers minds. He conquers hearts. He conquers territories without raising dust. He dominates through appearance, not essence, and that's the most profound point. The white horseman shows that the apocalypse doesn't begin with tragedy. It begins with deception. Chaos doesn't arrive first with fire, but with charm. It doesn't arrive with shouts, but with speeches. It doesn't arrive with flames, but with smiles. It is the false peace that precedes true disorder, the calm that announces the storm, the artificial order that masks a spiritual abyss being dug beneath humanity's feet. John, observing it, doesn't describe it with immediate fear, but with strangeness. There's something there that seems right, but doesn't fit. Something beautiful, but uncomfortable. Something that shines but doesn't illuminate. And all this paradox serves the purpose of warning those who read the prophecy. Not everything that seems divine is from God. Not all brilliance is light. Not every crown comes from heaven. Not every leader who says peace is building peace. Not every quick fix is a true solution. When the first seal is opened, what settles in the spiritual world is a kind of anesthesia. People don't perceive the advancement of the problem because they believe they are experiencing the solution. And that is exactly what makes this horseman so dangerous. He represents the kind of force that advances unnoticed, the kind of power that dominates stealthily, The kind of salvation that doesn't save, it only postpones, masks, disguises. And notice how well this image fits the pains of the audience that consumes this type of content. The fear of being deceived, the fear of following something false, the fear of trusting those who seem too right, the fear of bright promises that hide dark intentions. At the same time, there is a deep desire to understand the signs, to interpret the world, to know if we are experiencing this first seal symbolically, historically, or literally. Many people already look around and feel that there is something too white to be pure, something that promises peace while chaos grows beneath the surface. The white horseman is the beginning of the great spiritual paradox, the divine appearance that hides the essence of chaos, the false peace that prepares for war, the false light that prepares for darkness. He is the dramatic reminder that the apocalypse doesn't begin with an explosion. It begins with confusion, because while the world relaxes, believing it has found safety, the second seal is already ready to be broken. And that, my friend, changes everything. And before we move on to the next horseman, I want you to participate in this experience with me. This is important for you, and also for the algorithm to understand that this theme deeply affects you. So comment below if you've already seen this kind of false peace in our generation. Comment white peace if you're feeling the atmosphere that the first horseman represents. This greatly helps the video reach more people who need to understand this message. From the moment the second seal is broken, something changes in the air of John's vision, and it also changes in the heart of whoever hears this account. Because the red horseman doesn't arrive with riddles, doesn't arrive with gentle metaphors, doesn't arrive with that deceptive brilliance of the first horseman who seemed divine but hid a silent poison. No, the second horseman enters the scene bringing what humanity fears most and at the same time senses most: the collapse of order. And John, isolated on Patmos, living with the weight of persecution, imprisoned between rocks and sea, sees before him the sign that the world, at some point in history, would lose the last thread that kept nations breathing together. There is a heavy silence before he describes it, a silence that is not merely absent noise, but an omen, a charged atmosphere, as if the sky itself exhaled the truth that chaos doesn't arrive suddenly. It is permitted. And then John sees a horse as red as fire, red as blood spilled even before it is spilled, red as an open wound that has never been treated. The rider who drives it is given the authority to take peace from the earth. And that phrase alone carries a weight that few dare to face, because taking peace doesn't just mean provoking wars. It means opening the floodgates of what is already inside human beings, but which is normally contained by order, by morality, by fragile agreements, by social rules, by the stability that everyone pretends to control. The red horseman doesn't create conflict, he unleashes it. He pulls the trigger that many avoid admitting. The world is sustained by an artificial peace, and when that peace is taken away, everything that was hidden rises to the surface like a monster that has always been breathing in the dark. This is where the audience begins to feel the gravity of the subject, because we are talking about war, yes, but not only war between nations, empires, and armies. The sacred text describes something deeper, that men should kill one another. This points to an internal rupture, an emotional, moral, and spiritual collapse, divisions within homes, conflicts within cities, peoples against peoples, but also brothers against brothers. What John sees is not just the noise of weapons. It is the collapse of human coexistence. It is the moment when the fragile fabric of society tears, and when it tears, there is no longer any patch capable of holding it together. The red horseman moves as if riding over invisible cracks in the human heart. And each step of his horse seems to provoke yet another rupture, governments imploding, alliances breaking, peoples rising up, driven not by purpose, but by accumulated fury. John describes a great sword given to this horseman, a sword that is not only a symbol of violence, but a symbol of authority to allow the world to taste its own fallen nature. And this detail is crucial for those seeking to understand the apocalypse in depth. It is not the horseman who manufactures hatred. It is hatred that finally finds space to flow. And when the viewer realizes this, they understand that the second seal is not just a distant prophecy, but a mirror. Because all you have to do is look around, and here I'm speaking to you who are listening to me now, to realize how this red energy already whispers in the modern world. Division, polarization, broken relationships, gratuitous hatred, people who fight over nothing, people who kill for little, people who destroy on impulse. The red horseman appears as a symbol, but also as a warning. He represents the moment when humanity loses control, because peace has always been much more fragile than we imagined. And this part of the text needs to deeply affect the viewer, because it reveals the most human side of the apocalypse. It's not about celestial monsters, it's not just about symbolic creatures, but about the human heart, allowing chaos to become the norm. And John, sitting before that indescribable vision, feels the heavy atmosphere, perceives the impact, knows that what he is seeing is not just a description of a distant future, but the revelation of what human beings are capable of when they lose their sense of limits. The red horseman is the trigger for the rupture, but the rupture is born from within. And when you, who are watching me now, think about this, you inevitably ask yourself, how far does this line go? What is the point from which humanity can no longer return? The second seal raises this question like a spectre. It forces the viewer to confront the fact that chaos is not only external, but internal, that wars are symptoms, not causes, that global conflicts are merely amplified projections of the conflict that each human being carries within themselves. The night only reveals what already exists, and this revelation shakes the structures of the video, of understanding, of emotion. And before we move on to the next seal, because yes, there's more, and the intensity only increases, let me ask you something simple to strengthen this content and help this video reach more people who need to hear this. Comment below with the following code, so I know you're watching until the end and really immersing yourself in the topic. Write, "Peace has been taken away." And if you want me to delve deeper into this subject, also send "Continue the night." This greatly helps engagement and also creates a community that studies this mystery together. Want to continue? Then comment below, because the next seal is about to open. And what comes next is even more disturbing. When the second horseman finally departs, leaving behind a trail of rupture, division, and emotional chaos, John's vision doesn't breathe, doesn't slow down, doesn't offer relief. On the contrary, the spiritual atmosphere seems to narrow even further, as if heaven itself were preparing to reveal a kind of suffering that doesn't explode all at once, but corrodes slowly. A silent, daily, cruel suffering. It is in this heavy, almost unbearable atmosphere that the third seal breaks, and immediately John perceives something different in the air. It's not blood, it's not fire, it's not war. It's absence, it's emptiness, it's lack. And then he sees a black horse. Not red like open violence, not white like brilliant deceit. Black, dark as a moonless night, like burnt coal, like what remains when everything has turned to ash. In prophetic tradition, black has always been the color of mourning, pain, scarcity. And this horse rides bringing exactly that, hunger, not common hunger, not localized hunger, but the hunger born of inequality, imbalance, human injustice. Hunger as a consequence of the broken system itself. The rider who leads him carries neither bow nor sword. He carries a scale, And this detail should shock anyone who reads or watches this vision, because the scale is not a symbol of harvest, nor of abundance, nor of nourishment. It is a symbol of calculation, of commerce, of control. He does not bring food, he brings the price of food. The third rider does not arrive distributing seeds or bringing plagues. He brings economics. He brings the market. He brings inflation, inequality, selective scarcity. He represents a world where people may see food, but cannot buy it. John hears a voice, not from the rider, but from among the four living creatures, as if the heavens were announcing the gravity of the moment. And this voice says, "A liter of wheat for a whole day's work, 3 liters of barley for the same price." This is more than a weak economy. This is a collapsed system, an entire salary to buy what should be basic. Imagine this in your life. You work an entire day, just enough to survive today, and tomorrow you have to do it all again, and even then many wouldn't succeed. And the most disturbing aspect of the vision is that it shows not only poverty, but growing inequality, because the voice completes the warning, do not touch the wine and the oil. That is to say, the luxury items, the precious goods, what the richest used to celebrate, perfume, season, this remains intact. It is not lacking. It is not touched. It is not affected. In other words, while the people suffer from scarcity, some continue to have abundance. Not because they are stronger, but because the system protects those at the top. Do you see what João is seeing? He doesn't just see hunger. He sees injustice. He sees a world where those at the bottom work themselves to the limit, and even then lack the basics to survive. He sees a system where food becomes a currency of oppression, where misery is not an accident, it's a tool. The third horseman is the perfect symbol of this distortion, a hunger created by inequality, sustained by greed, maintained by manipulation. It is the price of hunger, it is the price of life placed on the scales. And here enters an even deeper layer, which those who follow this type of study always notice. None of the 4 horsemen act in isolation. The white horseman deceives, the red horseman divides, and now the black horseman demands payment. False peace generates rupture, rupture generates scarcity, scarcity generates despair, and so the cycle closes. The third seal shows that famine does not arise only from lack of rain or a bad harvest. It arises when humanity sacrifices justice in the name of profit, when the economy becomes a weapon, when selfishness dominates the structure. And John, faced with this vision, feels the pain we feel today when we look at the headlines. Because, to be very direct with you who are listening to me, this dynamic is already present in the real world. People who eat every day without thinking, people who don't even have the basics. Manipulated markets, food worth more than gold, essential products increasing in price while luxury goods remain accessible to only a few. John sees the spiritual system behind this. And this vision needs to make you reflect, because it doesn't just speak of a distant future, it exposes the essence of societies that choose profit over life. And perhaps the most painful part is understanding that the night isn't attacking a specific nation, nor causing sudden destruction. He simply reveals the consequence. He shows what happens when humanity chooses to walk without God, without compassion, without balance. The black night weighs down the earth. He shows where justice is lacking. He lays bare the difference between selective abundance and widespread misery. He exposes the wound. And as this vision unfolds, you feel that something needs to be said, something needs to be asked, something needs to be confronted. Because the famine of the third seal is not just physical, it is spiritual, it is emotional, it is moral. It is the famine of a world that has lost its sense of the value of life. And John describes this scene with enough precision that anyone, including you, can understand that this seal reveals a type of judgment that doesn't fall from the sky. It rises from the earth itself. When the third seal closes behind John, the vision doesn't slow down. There is no pause, no rest, no break to breathe. It's as if heaven itself is conducting a revelation that needs to be seen all at once, without interruption, without respite. And when the fourth seal breaks, John feels the weight of something no human mind is prepared to face, because this is not just another horseman. This is the only one whose name is revealed, and when God reveals a name, it's because that identity carries destiny, purpose, and a direct impact on all creation. John hears the fourth living creature say, "Come," and before him appears a horse unlike any other. It is not white like false peace, not red like conflict, not black like hunger. It is pale, yellowish, sick, the color of death, the color of a lifeless body, the color of decay. This hue does not exist among the living. It belongs to the realm where blood no longer flows, where warmth no longer exists, where the spirit has already been ripped from the chest. This is the horse of death, and the rider who mounts him has a name that echoes like silent thunder. Death. Death itself, personified, revealed, permitted to ride. It is not a metaphor. It is not superficial symbolism. It is an entity. It is spiritual force with divine permission. And behind him, here is what shocks even those who already know this text, comes hell. Not mounted, but following him like a shadow, like an unleashed beast, as an inevitable consequence. Where death passes, hell gathers. John describes this in detail, a detail few stop to consider. Death rides, hell follows. One acts, the other consumes. One takes the breath away, the other captures the soul. One strikes down the body, the other demands its destiny. It is the only moment in the entire vision where two spiritual forces appear acting jointly, simultaneously, in combination. The fourth seal reveals the most feared partnership of Revelation. And then John hears the sentence, "He was given power over a fourth of the earth," not over a geographical piece of land, not over a specific region, but over a portion of humanity, a quarter of mankind. A fraction that represents the magnitude of the impact, not its territorial limitation. Imagine this in the context of the modern world. Imagine the weight of an entity authorized to act in this way. Imagine a level of chaos that does not arise from human hands, but from the release of a spiritual power that surpasses wars, famine, deceit. It is the horseman with the greatest reach. It is the seal of the greatest rupture yet. And his method is not unique. John says that death acts through sword, famine, pestilence, and wild beasts of the earth. That is, it doesn't destroy in just one way. It operates as a complete package, a multiple collapse. The death of the fourth seal is not natural death. It is accelerated death. The death that comes through social collapse, disease, violence, and the imbalance of nature. All mixed together, all at the same time. It is death that advances like an invisible epidemic. A type of judgment that doesn't depend on weapons, but on permission. And this is where you need to pay attention. The horse's color is not a random detail. The pale yellow represents the final stage, the point where nothing remains to be saved. The first rider deceives, the second spills blood, the third empties, and the fourth reaps. He is the one who closes the cycle. He is the one who transforms the crisis into its final consequence. He is the one who shows the result of a world that rejects truth, embraces deceit, glorifies violence, and normalizes injustice. And look how it all makes sense when you put the pieces together. The white knight planted the seed of false hope. The red knight broke the social structure. The black knight eroded the resources. Now the yellow knight comes to reap what remains of this cycle. He doesn't need to incite wars. He doesn't need to manipulate markets. He doesn't need to deceive anyone. He only needs to ride upon what others have already destroyed. Chaos is already established. He merely finalizes it. Death is the logical conclusion of the total rupture. But John doesn't just describe the scene, he feels the emotional impact of seeing death by its own name. And you, listening to this now, need to understand something else very important. The fourth horseman is not just a symbol of physical destruction, he is a symbol of spiritual collapse. He represents the total loss of meaning in life. When deceived, people still fight. When divided, they still have strength. When hungry, they still have hope. But when spiritual death takes hold, everything dissolves. And the most terrifying detail, he doesn't come alone. Hell follows behind. This reveals a profound spiritual reality. When society loses its sense of God, inner death grows. And where there is no spiritual life, emptiness becomes the territory. Hell occupies the space where hope has been expelled. This vision is so brutal that John, a man accustomed to persecution, imprisonment, violence and pain, trembles. A man who saw the resurrected Christ, who heard the words of the Son of God himself, who walked with him for years, still feels the weight of the fourth seal, like a shock that cuts to the very soul. Do you realize the magnitude of this? We're not talking about mythological monsters, nor symbolic stories for children. We're talking about spiritual principles that operate in the real world. The yellow knight represents the final accumulation of human decadence. He is the mirror of what we become when we distance ourselves from the Creator. He is the synthesis of the consequences. He is total collapse. And at this point, I need you to tell me in the comments if this vision moved you. Comment, I saw the yellow horseman. So I know you've made it this far, because genuinely few people can absorb the weight of this label. If you want to engage even more, also comment Death Rides. This strengthens the video and helps me continue producing profound content about prophecies, signs, and spiritual mysteries. Take a breath, because it's not over yet. What comes after this is even deeper, and we'll pick it up right from here. When the fourth horseman disappears into the dust of the vision, John finds no rest. His mind does not immediately return to the silence of the island. On the contrary, something expands before him, as if the Spirit itself were saying, "Now see what you have not yet perceived." And it is at this instant that the most disturbing revelation of all arises. It is not the white horse, it is not the red one, it is not the black one, it is not the yellow one. It is something else, deeper, more silent, more insidious, something that does not come from above, but that grows from within humanity itself. The hidden revelation, the dramatic turning point, the moment when John understands that the horsemen are not coming, because they are already here, and this realization falls upon him like an uncomfortable, bitter, inevitable truth. It's as if the four seals were not merely future events, but continuous present manifestations, emerging in different eras, in different cultures, in different crises, as if the horseman rode before, rode during the revelation, and would continue riding as long as humanity insists on repeating the same mistakes. The prophecy, then, ceases to be merely an announcement and becomes a mirror of what we are, a mirror of what we create, a mirror of what we tolerate. Joan begins to see patterns that seem to span centuries. He sees conflicts arising like the Red Horseman, not only in declared wars, but in family divisions, in ideologies that tear apart entire societies, in small everyday acts of violence that explode into collective hatred. He sees hunger spreading like the Black Horseman, not only in devastated fields, but in inequalities that transform bread into privilege, food into currency, water into a rare commodity. He sees pandemics, diseases, and healthcare collapses as echoes of the Yellow Horseman, revealing that death doesn't need final authorization to be terrible. It only needs an environment where care has been lost and life has been trivialized. And John sees, perhaps most frightening of all, the false peace, the masked, disguised white knight, operating as seduction, narrative, empty promise. He sees speeches that seem correct, but carry the intention of control. He sees leaders who present themselves as liberators, but promote dependency. He sees movements that claim to protect, but imprison. He sees ideas that shine like gold, but crumble like dust. And at that moment, he understands. There is nothing more dangerous than the appearance of truth used to spread lies. And you, who are listening to this now, do you feel how this revelation connects everything? The horsemen have always been presented as figures of the end times, but John realizes that they are also figures of the present time. They emerge when humanity weakens its spiritual consciousness, when it loses its axis, when it replaces the Creator with its own passions. They emerge when we pretend we are in control, but we are already sunk in our own abysses. The false peace, you see it today. In social media filled with pretty phrases, but empty of character, in political promises that transform no one, in spiritual discourses packaged for consumption, but without roots, without depth, without truth. The white knight rides when people trust more in the shine than in the essence. The red horseman, you see him today, in the wars that erupt, but also in the grudges that divide families, in the fights over opinions that destroy relationships, in the ideologies that are worth more than lives, in the culture of cancellation, polarization, and hostility. The red horseman rides when humanity transforms difference into a weapon. The black horseman, you see him today, in the shelves full for some and empty for others, in the prices that rise without explanation, in the crisis that punishes the same people as always, in the selective abundance that creates hunger, not for lack of resources, but for lack of justice. The black horseman rides when wealth becomes an idol and the poor become statistics. And the yellow horseman, you see him today, in outbreaks, in illnesses, in collective depression, in the feeling of life being emptied. He rides through overcrowded hospitals, but also through weary souls, broken spirits, hearts that have lost their meaning. Physical death is terrible, but spiritual death, that corrodes silently. The yellow horseman rides when people are alive, but don't feel alive. And look how this revelation changes everything. John realizes that the seals don't just describe future disasters. They describe the symptoms of humanity's detachment. They aren't monsters that appear out of nowhere. They are consequences that emerge from humanity's own fall. That's why he trembles. That's why he cries. Because the vision makes it clear that the problem isn't heaven allowing the horsemen. The problem is the earth becoming the perfect environment for them. This is where the prophecy nudges, provokes, exposes. Because you, the viewer of this video, realize we are not so far from the horsemen. Perhaps they don't even need to manifest themselves literally for their works to be seen. Perhaps the prophecy is showing not only what is to come, but what has always been among us. And this should generate alert, fear, reflection. Because if the horsemen are already riding in patterns, in trends, in behaviors, then humanity needs to look at itself and ask, are we repeating the story of the apocalypse without realizing it? And this is the part that most affects those who truly pay attention. The prophecy is less about the future and more about the present. It's less about monsters and more about choices, less about divine destruction and more about human self-destruction. The horsemen are signs, signs of a world that trades truth for appearance, peace for conflict, justice for control, life for superficiality. And that is precisely why John sees the revelation not only as a warning, but as a calling. The horsemen expose the flaw, but also point the way back, because if they appear when we stray from the light, it means they weaken when we return to it. Prophecy is a mirror that says, see what it has become, and see what can still change. And before we continue, let me know if you're truly committed to this spiritual exploration with me. Comment, I saw the signs, if that part resonated with you. Or comment, the horsemen are already riding, to show that you understood the dramatic twist in this vision. This greatly helps me bring this content to more people who need to hear spiritual truths like this. They do not appear as irrational creatures thrown into chaos, but as forces that know exactly where they stand, forces that see what humanity tries to hide from itself. When we speak of the spiritual meaning of the four horsemen, we are not talking about unrestrained monsters. We are talking about divine instruments, cogs in a mechanism that operates above the surface of history, above human illusions, above our attempts to control what we do not understand. And that is precisely why so many people fear this subject, because the horsemen expose what we prefer to ignore. They don't just arrive, they reveal. They don't just impact, they strip bare. They don't appear to destroy for the sake of destruction. They appear to reveal what has been cultivated in secret, in the invisible, in the spiritual, in the moral, in the intimate. The first horseman dismantles human pride. The second exposes the fragility of peace built on sand. The third reveals the rot hidden behind wealth that feeds no one. And the fourth rips off the mask of mortality that we pretend not to see. But before we look at what they do, we need to understand what they are. Because the most common mistake is to treat them as merely symbolic or literal entities, when in fact they are both at the same time. They are symbols that act, they are images that move, they are archetypes that traverse eras with real impact. They are the divine hand touching human matter. The central point is, they are not destruction. They are justice. They are restoration. They are the process that precedes healing, the painful one. Because before healing tissue, you must cut away what is necrotic. Before restoring a building, you must tear down what is rotten. Before building a new story, you must unearth everything that was built on lies, greed, and violence. The horsemen are sent to cut, remove, reveal. They are not the end. They are the beginning of the end of illusion. They are the beginning of revelation. And if someone tries to understand the seals without seeing this side, they miss the most important depth. They do not bring random chaos, they bring divine order. An order so different from ours that at first glance it seems like destruction. The first horseman reveals the truth about human ambition. He exposes the idolatry of power. He shows that humanity has built empires based on the glitter of the crown, but not on the character of the soul. He lays bare how much more we trust leaders who promise than in principles that transform. He is divine pedagogy showing what you choose to reign over you defines your destiny. The White Knight is not just conquest. It is exposure. He forces every nation, every person, every system to see itself in the mirror. The second horseman reveals the price of hatred. He tears away the veneer of civilization and shows that, beneath the speeches of peace, lives a humanity full of disputes, grievances, and rivalries. He shows that war never begins on the battlefield. It begins within the human heart, in spiritual breaches, in grudges, resentments, and the inability to forgive. He is the divine hand saying, "See what you have nurtured for centuries." External conflict is nothing more than a reflection of inner conflict. The third horseman reveals the injustice we uphold. He holds a scale in his hand, not to weigh food, but to weigh consciences. He shows that inequality is not an accident. It is a human construct. He highlights that while some accumulate without limits, others beg for crumbs, and humanity still dares to question why the earth seems to scream. The Black Horseman exposes entire systems that were built on exploitation. He does not create hunger. He reveals the hunger that already existed. His role is to show humanity as it is, and as it has become by choosing profit over life. And then comes the fourth, the one whose name no one forgets. He is different from the others because he doesn't hide what he represents: death and Hades. There is no more direct, more raw, more final metaphor. He reveals the truth we spend our entire lives trying to cover up. We are fragile, we are finite, We are dust. But the most shocking thing is that the fourth horseman is not just a consequence, he is a diagnosis. He is the logical conclusion of everything the other three reveal. If the first shows the deception, the second shows the rupture, the third shows the injustice, the fourth shows the natural result of all this when nothing is corrected. He is God saying, "This is what humanity reaps when it ignores its own rot." And here is the most profound spiritual point of all. The horsemen are not irrational punishment. They are pedagogical justice. They appear when society reaches the point where it no longer wants to hear gentle truths. They appear when humanity insists on walking towards the abyss. They appear to reveal what was hidden, to tear away the veil once and for all. The emotional impact is enormous because they expose what we have nurtured for centuries, what we have allowed to grow in darkness. Idolatry, pride, hatred, greed, violence, injustice, death. That is what they reveal. That is what they expose. That is why so many people fear prophecy, not because it speaks of the future, but because it speaks of the present. The horsemen show that the spiritual world is connected to the physical world in a way we have forgotten. When the prophecy says they come out, it means that something hidden is coming to light, something that has always been there, but that no one wanted to see. They are spiritual forces acting on human matter. They are divine movements that show how far the heart of humanity has strayed from the light. They clear the ground so that something new can be born afterward. Nothing born of corruption lasts. Nothing that grows on injustice prospers. Nothing built on lies endures. And the knights have precisely this mission, to overthrow what cannot remain. That is why understanding their spiritual meaning is understanding the very essence of divine justice. It is not vengeance. It is restoration. It is diagnosis. It is revelation. It is the moment when everything that seemed hidden finally comes to light. They are not the end. They are the process that paves the way for the end of darkness. If you've stayed with me until now, comment below, "I'm seeing what was hidden." Or if you want something deeper, write, "Revelation." I want to know how many are truly following this spiritual journey without fear of facing the truth. Before the end comes the warning. And this phrase, which many treat as a cliché, is precisely what most ignore until it's too late. When we speak of the message to the world, we are not talking about panic, nor about desperate predictions. We are talking about mercy. And mercy never arrives too silently to go unnoticed, but it also never arrives too loudly to force anyone. That is exactly where humanity stumbles, on the warning signs that it itself pretends not to see. God does not shout, God signals. And the world, distracted, runs without looking to the sides like someone walking towards an abyss with headphones on, thinking that nothing can go wrong. But it can. And it will. And the message of the horseman is not the end has come, but you still have time to realize what is happening. It's astonishing how humanity likes to see itself as an observer of the apocalypse, as if we were watching distant events, disconnected from our reality. But what if the oath isn't an event but a reading? What if the message isn't a sign in the sky, but in our behavior? What if the divine voice doesn't come through thunder, but through consequences? The truth is that before God allows something to happen, He always sends signs. This is the spiritual rule that no one should ignore. Nothing comes without warning. Nothing falls from nowhere. Nothing explodes without symptoms. Warning always comes before impact. The four horsemen emerge as the materialization of all this, as if they were the incarnation of a global warning. Pay attention, because the clock is ticking. And here's something almost no one realizes. The warning is never just about the world. It's about us, about choices, about directions, about what we are allowing to flourish within ourselves. Many think prophecy is a script of destruction, but in reality it is a mirror, and an extremely sincere one. It doesn't ask if you're prepared, it shows you if you are. It doesn't ask if you want to see, it reveals it anyway. And when God allows signs to multiply, when patterns begin to repeat, when the sense of urgency grows, it's not terror, it's grace. It's the last call before the door closes. It's the chance to realize that time has always been shorter than we imagined. It's curious how people misunderstand the word alert. They imagine an alarm, something frightening, something that makes everyone run in all directions. But in spirituality, the alert is different. It is gentle yet constant. It is too profound to be ignored by those who are awake, but discreet enough to be disregarded by those who remain asleep. This duality is the key. Only those who want to perceive, understand. Only those who want to understand, awaken. And when we consider the symbolism of the horsemen from this perspective, everything changes, because each one carries a message, and together they form a spiritual code that needs to be deciphered before the world loses the little time it has left. The first horseman warns about deceptions, about leaders who promise human salvation when, in reality, they reinforce the downfall. The second warns that peace is fragile because humanity is proud. The third cries out about the inequality we pretend not to see. The fourth shows that death is inevitable, but it is also avoidable in a spiritual sense. This set is not destruction, it is persistent mercy. And the question that echoes, the question that truly matters is, who is paying attention? How many are truly seeing beyond the surface? How many realize that the signs were not sent to instill fear, but to prevent spiritual tragedies? Humanity is quick to analyze wars, economic crises, pandemics, and disasters as if they were isolated events. But those with spiritual discernment understand they are not accidents, they are echoes. They are waves from the same epicenter. They are reminders. They are warning signs pulsing on the edge of a spiritual road where most people are speeding along without thinking. There's a profound detail in this process. The warning doesn't just warn about the future, it warns about the present, because the real danger is never what's about to happen. It's what's already happening without anyone realizing it. The apocalypse doesn't appear suddenly, it develops. It grows like a storm that begins with a breeze but ends with a hurricane. And we are living precisely in the phase where the breeze has already turned into wind, but many still pretend that nothing has changed. It is in this silence, in this indifference, in this normalization of chaos that the warning shines brightest. Because when society begins to accept what should cause astonishment, it's a sign that time is truly running out. And time is short not because God wants to frighten, but because He wants to save. Do you understand the difference? The warning is not punishment. The warning is opportunity. The message is clear. Wake up while there is still time. Adjust your course while there is still a path. Look up while there is still light. That is why apocalyptic language is so full of urgency, not to generate fear, but to awaken consciousness. It is the kind of urgency that tries to pull someone by the hand before they fall off a precipice. It is the kind of urgency that says, I don't want you to perish, I want you to see, and this is the most transcendental part of this whole message. God doesn't send warnings to those who are already condemned, but to those who can still be saved. He doesn't warn the dead, He warns the living. He doesn't speak to those who have given up, He speaks to those who can still hear. The horsemen are a spiritual alarm, not an ultimatum of destruction. They reveal the depth of divine mercy, a mercy that never tires of calling, of warning, of preparing. And you know what impresses me most? Humanity has always received warnings before major collapses. Before the flood, there were warnings. Before the fall of empires, there were signs. Before drastic changes in spiritual history, there were messages that few heeded. We live in a cycle that repeats itself, but this time the echo is greater, the reach is global, the impact is total. And this is not to generate terror, it is to generate spiritual vigilance, a sense of purpose, an awareness that nothing is eternal, and at the same time, everything has a meaning. And now we arrive at the point that nobody likes to face, but everyone feels deep down. The question that won't leave the mind in peace when the lights go out, when the city sleeps, when silence finally covers what we try to ignore. The question that haunts, that bothers, that provokes, has the fourth horseman already left the seal? And the reason this question bothers us so much is not because we seek an immediate answer, but because, deep down, we fear that the answer is already before our eyes, and we simply don't want to admit it. When we speak of the fourth horseman, we speak of a power that is not symbolic. It is real. It is palpable. It is the last warning before the finish line. It is not the horseman of conquest. It is not the horseman of war. It is not the horseman of famine. It is death, but not just physical death. It is the death of meaning, of morality, of false hope, of the illusions we hold so tightly. It is a collapse that comes not only from the outside in, but from the inside out. And this is the part that most fear to face. Judgment does not begin when the world ends. It begins when consciousness awakens. That is why the question about the fourth seal is so unsettling, because it is less about the horseman and more about us. Look around you. Look at the crises that accumulate like successive waves. Look at how humanity has become accustomed to death, not just the death stamped on numbers, but the silent, emotional, spiritual, moral death. See how banal everything has become. See how evil has ceased to shock. See how injustice has ceased to cause outrage. See how coldness has become normal, as if feeling empty were the norm, as if living anesthetized were the natural destiny of humankind. Is the fourth horseman still waiting for the seal to be broken? Or is he simply already riding among us, and we just don't want to accept it yet? This is the point. The signs are no longer subtle. They don't whisper. They scream. They are everywhere, but most only see them when they feel the blow firsthand. Spiritual death is no longer the exception. It's the rule. Emotional chaos is no longer an accident. It's routine. Humanity lives exhausted, drained, divided, driven mad by pressures it has created itself. The feeling that something is profoundly wrong is not paranoia. It's discernment. And this is where the mystery intensifies. Perhaps the seal has already been broken for longer than we imagine, and what we see now are merely the delayed reflections of an inevitable liberation. But there is another perspective, deeper, bolder, more spiritual. Even if the seal has already been broken, the rider does not come to destroy those who are standing. He comes to expose what is already dead inside. He reveals the emptiness we carry disguised as strength. He shows the truth behind the masks, behind the speeches, behind the choices we made thinking they were neutral. The judgment that many imagine as a cataclysmic event begins intimately, in the conscience. It is there that the battle is fought before the world sees anything. It is there that the seal snaps before the horse is released. And then, inevitably, another question arises. If the fourth horseman is already riding, what comes next? This question, indeed, is an open wound, because when we understand that the horsemen are not just signs of the end, but signs of the present, we realize that the sequence doesn't depend solely on heaven. It depends on us. What comes next is a consequence of inner preparation. It is a reflection of spiritual vigilance. It is the fruit of what each person cultivates in their own heart. The prophecy has always been clear. Before the world is judged, the human heart is. Before the universe trembles, the soul trembles. Before the end arrives, the truth arrives. And this truth is unsettling because it forces each of us to look inward with brutal honesty. The question, has the fourth horseman already left his seal, transforms into an even more incisive one. What would he find inside me if he were already at my door? And no one can answer that for you. Not me, not religion, not tradition, not society. It's an answer that arises from what you carry when no one is watching. That's where the judgment begins. Not on the throne, in the heart. And perhaps that's the great revelation of this ending. The fear shouldn't be of the horseman. The fear should be of ignoring the warning, because the purpose of the apocalypse was never to frighten, it was to awaken. And awakening hurts. Awakening demands courage, it demands renunciation, it demands honesty, it demands breaking through one's own blindness. The horsemen, all of them, don't come to annihilate us, they come to remind us of what we've forgotten. They are, in essence, signs of mercy. And the fourth, however terrifying, carries with it a reminder. While you feel the unease, there is still time. While you question, there is still life. While you search for meaning, the seal hasn't defeated you. You can still rise. If you've made it this far, it's because you feel something greater is speaking to you, so don't let that connection fade. Subscribe to the channel now, activate the bell, and make sure you don't miss the next chapters of this spiritual journey we're building together. Leave a like to support this content and comment below what caught your attention most in this video. Seriously, I really want to read your thoughts. And don't leave yet, the next video is already appearing on the screen. Click now and continue this journey with me.